Commander Jehun Park pressed his face against the cold glass of Lunar Station's observation deck. His breath fogged the window as he watched the most important moment in human history unfold before his eyes. 3 days ago, humanity had been alone, in the universe. Now dozens of alien ships floated in space like glittering jewels against the black void. The ships were beautiful in a way that made Jehun's chest tight with wonder. They looked like they were made of living crystal, catching and bending starlight into rainbow patterns. Some were as long as city blocks, others small and sleek like metallic fish. They moved without any visible engines, gliding through space as if swimming through water. "Sir, the alien delegation is requesting permission to board," came a voice through his communicator. Jehun nodded, though his stomach churned with nervousness. Humanity had dreamed of this day for centuries, but now that it was here, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Down in the station's main conference room, Dr. Minji Kim adjusted her translator device for the 100th time. As Earth's leading expert on alien biology, she had studied every piece of data they had received from the visitors. The main species called themselves the Galactic Council, representing dozens of different alien races from across the galaxy. The doors hissed open, and Minji's breath caught. The aliens were nothing like the friendly visitors from old movies. The leader stood nearly 8 feet tall, with a body that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a spider. His skin was dark green and shiny, covered in what looked like natural armor plates. 4 arms ended in hands with too many joints, and his head was triangular with compound eyes that reflected the room's lights like black mirrors. "I am Ambassador Vorthak of the Hegemony," the creature said, his voice coming through the translator as cold and mechanical. "We represent the dominant species in this sector of the galaxy." Behind him came other aliens that looked completely different. Some floated in gas-filled suits, their bodies barely visible through the swirling mist. Others appeared to be made of living crystal, their forms shifting and changing as they moved. Each species looked more advanced and powerful than anything humanity had ever imagined. Minji stood and bowed slightly, the way they had practiced. "Welcome to our solar system. I am Dr. Minji Kim, representing Earth and all of humanity. We are honored by your visit and hope to learn from your advanced civilizations." Vorthak's head tilted in what might have been amusement. He walked around the room, his forearms moving independently as he examined the human technology. To Minji, their conference room had seemed impressive with its holographic displays and quantum computers. But watching Vorthak's reaction, she realized it must look like cave paintings to someone from an advanced galactic civilization. "Interesting," Vorthak said, running one of his hands over a computer console. "Your species has achieved basic space, flight and primitive artificial intelligence. Barely past the Stone Age by galactic standards, but you show potential." The other aliens remained silent, but Minji noticed how the crystal beings seemed to shift nervously when Vorthak spoke. The gas breathers moved closer together, as if seeking protection in numbers. Something about their behavior made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. "We have catalogued your population and technological capabilities," Vorthak continued, now standing directly in front of Minji. Up close, she could see her reflection multiplied dozens of times in his compound eyes. "Approximately 8 billion individuals, good genetic diversity and remarkable adaptability to harsh environments. Your species breeds quickly and shows excellent physical resilience." The way he said it made Minji feel like a farmer discussing livestock. She forced herself to smile and remain diplomatic, but inside warning bells were screaming. This wasn't how first contact was supposed to go. Where were the cultural exchanges, the sharing of knowledge, the celebration of 2 species meeting, and across the vastness of space? "Your offer of friendship is most generous," Vorthak said, though his tone suggested he found the idea ridiculous. "The hegemony is always interested in bringing new species into our sphere of influence. We can offer you protection, guidance, and a place in the greater galactic community." One of the crystal beings made a sound like wind chimes in a storm, which the translator rendered as urgent whispers. But Vorthak silenced them with a gesture of his lower right arm. "Of course, such benefits come with responsibilities," he continued. "Your species would need to contribute to the greater good of the galaxy. We have mining operations on distant Worlds that require willing workers. Your people's adaptability would be most valuable in such environments. Minji felt her blood turn to ice. The alien wasn't offering partnership. He was offering slavery, dressed up in diplomatic language. She looked at the other aliens again and realized why they seemed so nervous. They had seen this before. They knew what happened when the hegemony decided a species was useful. "We appreciate your offer," Minji said carefully, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But humanity values its independence. Perhaps we could discuss other forms of cooperation." Vorthak's compound eyes seemed to focus on her more intently, and she had the uncomfortable feeling of being studied by a predator deciding whether she was worth the effort to catch. Captain Sunho Lee was drinking his morning coffee when the alarms started screaming. He had been stationed at Titan Base for 3 years, and the worst emergency they had ever faced was a minor asteroid collision. Now, as he rushed to the command center, his hands shaking as he pulled on his uniform, he could see something that made his blood freeze. Dozens of alien warships hung in space around Saturn, like dark storm clouds. They were nothing like the beautiful crystal ships that had visited Earth 3 weeks ago. These vessels looked like they were built for war, with angular hulls covered in weapon ports and strange energy fields crackling around them like purple lightning. "Sir, they're not responding to any communications," reported Lieutenant Minseo Park, her voice tight with fear. "They've been scanning our defenses for the past 10 minutes. Sunho grabbed the microphone with trembling fingers. "Unknown vessels. This is Captain Lee of the Titan Defense Force. You are in violation of the Mars Accords. Please state your intentions and withdraw from this system immediately." The response came not in words, but in weapons fire. Beams of pure energy lanced out from the alien ships, and Sunho watched in horror as his entire fleet simply vanished. One moment, the destroyer Busan Hope was there, its crew of 200 souls going about their morning duties. The next moment, there was nothing but empty space and scattered atoms. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Sunho screamed into his radio, but it was already too late. The alien weapons didn't just destroy their targets, they seemed to erase them from existence entirely. Matter turned into energy in brilliant flashes of light, and within 2 hours, Titan Base itself was nothing but cosmic dust. Meanwhile, on the agricultural colony of New Busan, farmer Hyejin Choi was harvesting vegetables. In her greenhouse, when the sky turned dark, she looked up to see massive alien ships blotting out the sun, their hulls so large they seemed to stretch from horizon to horizon. At first, she thought they might be the same peaceful aliens who had visited Earth. Maybe they wanted to see how humans lived on other worlds, or learn about their farming techniques. But then the ships opened, and her hope turned to terror. Strange devices dropped from the alien vessels like metal spiders, each one the size of a small building. They hit the ground with earth-shaking thuds and immediately began to unfold, revealing complex machinery that hummed and crackled with energy. Within minutes, the devices were projecting nets made of pure light across the colony. Hyejin watched in horror as her neighbors were caught in these energy nets like fish in a trawler. The nets didn't hurt them, but they couldn't break free no matter how hard they struggled. Old Mr. Dongsik from the next farm over was lifted right off his feet, along with his wife and 3 grandchildren, who had been visiting for the harvest. "Festival, please," Hyejin screamed, running toward the aliens who were now emerging from their ships. "They're just children. Take me instead." But the aliens ignored her pleas completely. They moved with cold, mechanical precision, sorting the captured humans like they were processing cargo. Strong young men were placed in one group, women of childbearing age in another. Children and elderly people were catalogued separately, their fate uncertain. The aliens themselves were terrifying to look at. Some were the same insect-like creatures Hyejin had seen on the news broadcasts from Earth, but others were completely different. There were tall, grey beings with too many joints in their arms, and smaller creatures that scuttled on 6 legs, like metallic crabs. All of them treated the humans like objects to be counted and stored. Hyejin tried to hide in her greenhouse, but the aliens found her within minutes. Their scanning devices could apparently see through walls and detect human life signs. As the energy net closed around her, she saw her entire life's work. 20 years of careful farming and community building being trampled under alien feet. Back on Earth, Admiral Donghyun Nam was having the worst day of his career. His communication center was chaos, with officers frantically trying to make sense of dozens of distress calls coming in from across the outer solar system. "Sir, we've lost contact with Titan Base," reported Commander Yejin Song, her face pale. Last transmission indicated they were under attack by unknown vessels. "Europa mining station is also offline," added Lieutenant Daehyun Ko, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. They managed to transmit a partial message about alien raiders before the signal cut out. The reports kept coming in, each one worse than the last. 17 colonies in total, from the ice, mining operations around Jupiter, to the farming communities in the asteroid belt. All of them had gone silent within a 6-hour period, and the few emergency messages they had received painted a terrifying picture of coordinated alien attacks. "How long until our fastest ships can reach the outer system?" Admiral Nam asked. Though he already knew the answer would be devastating. 3 weeks minimum, sir," Commander Song replied quietly. "Our patrol fleet is too far out, and the main battle group is still undergoing repairs from the engine upgrade program." Admiral Nam stared at the tactical display showing the locations of the lost colonies. Each red dot represented thousands of human lives, families, and communities that had trusted Earth's government to protect them. Now they were gone, and there was nothing he could do but watch helplessly as the reports continued to pour in. Meanwhile, Ambassador Vorthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the harvest operation with satisfaction. The humans had proven even more valuable than his initial assessment had suggested. They came in useful varieties: strong workers for the heavy mining operations, clever technicians for the precision work, and plenty of breeding stock to ensure a steady supply for future needs. "Excellent work," he told his subordinates as the cargo holds filled with their human prizes. "These creatures will serve the hegemony well in our expansion projects." The encrypted data packet reached Earth's communication center at exactly 14:27 Greenwich Mean Time, 47 hours after New Geneva colony had gone silent. Communications officer Ji-won Yu was finishing her shift when the automated systems flagged an incoming transmission from the outer colonies. She almost deleted it, thinking it was just another routine status update that had been delayed by the recent solar storms, but something about the file size made her pause. It was massive, too big for a simple colony report. Her hands trembled as she opened the file, and within seconds she was running down the hallway toward the emergency command center, tears streaming down her face. President Su Yung-han was in the middle of a budget meeting when her security chief burst through the doors without knocking. General Ki-won Lim's face was ashen, and his usually steady voice cracked as he spoke. "Madam President, you need to see this immediately. It's from New Geneva colony." The situation room filled quickly as emergency protocols activated. Cabinet members, military advisors, and intelligence chiefs gathered around the main display screen, their conversations dying away as the video began to play. The footage was crystal clear, too clear. The alien security cameras had captured everything in perfect, horrifying detail. New Geneva colony's main square looked like a scene from humanity's darkest history. Hundreds of colonists were gathered in the center, surrounded by towering alien soldiers. The people looked exhausted and terrified, many still wearing their pajamas or work clothes from when they had been dragged from their homes. Families huddled together, parents instinctively shielding their children with their bodies. President Han recognized some faces from the colony's annual reports. There was pharmacist Sung-min Park, who had volunteered to establish the colony's medical center, teacher Yoona Shin, who had sent videos of her students learning about Earth's history in their small schoolhouse, engineer Hyun-woo Kim, whose innovative farming techniques had made the colony self-sufficient in food production. But it was the children that made President Han's heart stop. 12 small figures, ranging in age from maybe 5 to 15 years, old, had been separated from their families and forced to kneel in the dust. They were crying, calling for their mothers and fathers, their young voices barely audible over the alien translator devices. Ambassador Vorthak stepped into view, his insect-like form immediately recognizable from the diplomatic meetings just weeks earlier. The same creature who had sat in Earth's finest conference rooms, who had been offered humanity's friendship and cooperation, now stood over a group of terrified children like a predator savoring its prey. "Citizens of New Geneva," Vorthak announced, his mechanical voice carrying across the square. "Your species has shown remarkable resistance to integration into our galactic community. This resistance is inefficient." One of the children, a little girl with pigtails, tried to stand up and run toward her mother. An alien soldier casually pushed her back down, and she fell hard on the rocky ground, scraping her knees. The sound of her crying seemed to echo in the Situation Room, making several of the hardened military officers look away from the screen. "However," Vorthak continued, raising one of his forearms, "the hegemony is not unreasonable. We understand that primitive species sometimes require education regarding the consequences of defiance. What happened next would be burned into the memory of every human who witnessed it." President Han felt her stomach turn to ice as she watched Vorthak methodically approach each child. The alien weapon he carried looked almost elegant, a sleek device that hummed with deadly energy. There was no malice in his movements, no anger or hatred, just cold mechanical efficiency, as if he were performing a routine maintenance task. The first child, a boy who couldn't have been older than 8, looked up at Vorthak with confused eyes. He probably didn't even understand what was happening. The energy beam lasted less than a second, and the boy simply crumpled to the ground like a broken toy. The parents screamed. They fought against the alien soldiers, holding them back, desperate to reach their children. But the aliens were too strong, and the humans could only watch helplessly as Vorthak moved to the next child, then the next, 12 times. 12 small bodies in the dust of New Geneva colony. 12 families destroyed forever. "An example," Vorthak announced to the surviving colonists, his voice as calm as if he were discussing the weather, "of the price of resistance. Submit to hegemony authority, and no further examples will be necessary." The video ended there, but the silence in the Situation Room stretched on for what felt like hours. President Han stared at the blank screen, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. These weren't soldiers or revolutionaries who had been killed. They were children, innocent children who had never hurt anyone, whose only crime was being born human. General Lim was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "Madam President, this footage is already spreading across the global networks. Every major news outlet has received copies. Within the hour, every person on Earth will have seen this." President Han nodded slowly, feeling something fundamental change inside her chest. The diplomatic protocols, the careful political calculations, the hope for peaceful coexistence, all of it burned away in an instant, replaced by something far more primal and terrible. She picked up the secure phone that connected her directly to the leaders of every major nation on Earth. The first call was to General Secretary Viktor Petrov in Moscow. The conversation was brief, but it would echo through human history. "Victor, have you seen the footage from New Geneva? Yes, they killed our children, Soo-young. Then we killed them all." "Agreed. Total war. No mercy." The call lasted exactly 43 seconds. Within 6 hours, every major human government had declared a state of total war against the hegemony. The age of diplomacy was over. The age of human wrath had begun. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in a laboratory that officially didn't exist, Dr. Tae-Hyung Shin sat staring at blueprints that had been locked away for 2 decades. His hands shook as he spread the classified documents. Across his desk, designs for weapons so terrible that 3 different ethics committees had voted to bury them forever. The fusion plasma hybrid warhead had been his masterpiece. Back in graduate school, a theoretical weapon that could turn entire city blocks into superheated gas in milliseconds. His professors had been horrified. The military had been fascinated. The Ethics Review Board had stamped it with so many classification levels that even Tae-Hyung himself had needed special clearance to access his own work, but that was before New Geneva. Before 12 children died in the dust, while their parents screamed helplessly. Now, as Tae-Hyung looked at his equations and calculations, he felt no horror at what he had created. He felt only regret that he hadn't built it sooner. His phone buzzed with a message from General Kiwan Lim. All ethical restrictions lifted. Build everything. Build it now. Taehyung's fingers flew across his keyboard as he sent the weapon specifications to manufacturing facilities around the globe. Within hours, factories in Germany, Japan, and South Korea were retooling their production lines. The same precision equipment that had built smartphones and computer chips now began crafting components for humanity's most devastating weapons. Across the world, in a gleaming corporate tower in Seoul, CEO Yoona Park was having the most important board meeting of her career. The 40-story building that housed Park Industries had always been a symbol of South Korea's technological success. Her company had built the processors in half the world's computers, the sensors in countless smartphones, and the guidance systems in peaceful satellites. "Ladies and gentlemen," Yoona announced to her board of directors, her voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. "As of this morning, Park Industries is no longer in the consumer electronics business. Every factory, every research facility, every engineer in our company now has one job: building weapons to kill aliens." The boardroom erupted in concerned voices. Stock prices, profit margins, international contracts, the usual business concerns that had dominated their lives just days earlier. But Yoona silenced them with a single gesture, pointing to the wall screen that showed footage from New Geneva on endless repeat. "Our stock price is irrelevant," she said quietly. "Our profit margins are meaningless. Those creatures murdered human, children, and every circuit board we make, every targeting computer we produce, every guidance system we build is going to help us make them pay for it." Within 24 hours, Park Industries had converted 17 manufacturing facilities across 3 continents. Assembly lines that had produced gaming consoles now churned out targeting computers for missile systems. Clean rooms that had crafted delicate computer processors now manufactured drone chassis designed for one purpose: carrying explosives to alien targets. Meanwhile, at a heavily guarded facility outside Tokyo, Captain Minho Song was leading the most important engineering project in human history. His team had recovered pieces of alien technology from the wreckage at Titan Base, fragments of hull plating, damaged weapon components, and most importantly, a nearly intact alien communication device. "Sir, we've been working for 36 hours straight," complained engineer Jae-hyun Lee, his eyes red from staring at alien circuits under microscopes. "Maybe we should get some rest." Minho looked up from the alien device he was dissecting, his face grim. "Those people in the colonies don't get to rest. The children who died at New Geneva don't get to rest. We sleep when every human prisoner is free and every alien responsible is dead." The team worked with desperate intensity, fueled by caffeine pills and pure determination. They had never seen technology like this before. Circuits that seemed to bend light, energy sources that defied their understanding of physics, materials that were stronger than anything humanity had ever created. But they were learning, adapting, stealing every secret they could from their alien enemies. "I figured out their energy shielding system," announced Dr. Soyeon Kim, one of the team's physicists. Her hair was a mess, and she had coffee stains on her lab coat, but her eyes blazed with excitement. "If we reverse the polarity and modify our plasma cannons, we can punch right through their defenses." "How long to build a prototype?" Minho asked. "Give me 72 hours and every manufacturing facility in Japan. Done." In New York, the United Nations building was experiencing the most dramatic transformation in its 70-year history. Representatives from 193 nations had gathered for an emergency session that would last less than 4 hours but change the course of human civilization forever. Secretary General In Woo Chang stood before the assembled delegates, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's fury. The United Nations was created to promote peace and cooperation between nations, but there can be no peace with creatures who murder children. There can be no cooperation with aliens who treat humans like livestock. The vote was unanimous. In a single session, the United Nations dissolved itself and reformed as the Human Defense Coalition. Every nuclear weapon, every military satellite, every soldier and scientist on Earth now served under a single command structure with a single purpose: total war against the hegemony. President Su-Yung Han was named Supreme Commander of Human Forces with absolute authority over every military asset on the planet. Her first order was simple: bring our people home. Kill anyone who stands in our way. Within a week, the transformation was complete. Humanity had awakened from its dreams of peaceful coexistence and revealed its true nature. Every factory, every laboratory, every government office now served the war effort. Scientists who had spent their careers studying climate change now designed biological weapons. Engineers who had built bridges and hospitals now crafted spacecraft designed for one purpose: carrying death to alien worlds. The creatures who had dismissed humanity as primitive had made a fatal error. They had awakened a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of warfare. And now that terrible expertise was focused on a single target. The aliens had wanted to harvest humanity like crops. Instead, they had planted the seeds of their own destruction. Deep in the asteroid belt, on a mining platform that the aliens had designated Zerion 7, former construction worker Yoonji Kim crouched in the darkness of the maintenance tunnels. Her hands were raw and bleeding from crawling through the narrow spaces, but she didn't care. After 3 weeks of slavery, she had finally found what she was looking for: the main power conduits that fed energy to the prisoner restraint systems. The alien guards thought they were so smart with their energy shackles. The glowing bands around each prisoner's wrists and ankles would deliver paralyzing shocks if anyone tried to escape or fight back. But the aliens had made one crucial mistake. They had forced humans to do the maintenance work on their own prison. Yoonji had spent 15 years building skyscrapers in Seoul before volunteering for colony work. She knew how to read blueprints, how to trace electrical systems, and most importantly, how to find the weak points in any structure. The aliens saw her as just another piece of equipment, but she was actually memorizing every pipe, every wire, every access panel in their precious mining station. Working in the deep tunnels during the night shift, when most guards were resting, Yoonji had carefully modified a plasma cutter used for asteroid mining. The tool was designed to slice through solid rock, but with a few adjustments, it could cut through energy fields just as easily. The first time she used it to free her shackles, the relief was so overwhelming she almost cried. But Yoonji didn't just free herself. Over the following nights, she moved like a ghost through the prisoner barracks, carefully selecting people she could trust. Construction worker Dong-Hyun Seo, who had helped build the Mars colonies. Former military engineer Jin Hee-yoon, who understood explosives better than anyone. Farmer Chang-min Han, whose quiet determination reminded everyone why they were fighting. "Listen, carefully," Yoonji whispered to the small group gathered in the mining shaft's deepest tunnel. "We are not cattle waiting for slaughter. We are humans, and humans have been fighting and surviving for thousands of years. These aliens think they can break us, but they're about to learn what happens when you corner a predator." The plan was simple but deadly. The mining platform was filled with equipment that could be turned into weapons. Plasma cutters became swords that could slice through alien armor. Industrial explosives, meant for breaking up asteroids, could blow holes in spaceship hulls. Even the mining robots could be reprogrammed to attack their alien operators instead of harvesting ore. "They keep us alive because they need our labor," Yoonji explained, her voice filled with cold fury. "But we're going to show them that human labor comes with a price they can't afford to pay." The first guard died quietly during the night shift. His insect-like body found the next morning with a plasma cutter burned through his chest. The aliens increased security, but it didn't matter. Humans were small, clever, and desperate. They could hide in spaces too narrow for alien bodies, move through maintenance shafts that weren't even on the official blueprints, and strike with weapons their captors never expected. Within a week, Zerion 7 was in chaos. Mining quotas fell as equipment mysteriously malfunctioned. Guard patrols found their members missing, with only scorch marks and alien blood left behind. The station's communication systems were sabotaged so frequently that the aliens couldn't even call for help without the humans knowing about it first. Meanwhile, in the cold darkness between Mars and Jupiter, Captain Jaewon-oh's stealth frigate drifted silently toward a hegemony supply convoy. The ship had been designed for reconnaissance missions, built with experimental technology that could bend light around its hull and make it nearly invisible to sensors. But Captain O wasn't using it for spying anymore. Remember New Geneva was painted on the ship's hull in dark red letters. O's crew had mixed the paint with blood from their previous battles, alien blood, taken from enemies who would never threaten human children again. It had become their ritual, their way of honoring the 12 small lives lost on that distant colony. "Target acquired," whispered Lieutenant Kyung-ho Park from the sensor station. "Convoy of 6 supply ships, minimal escort. They're carrying processed metals from the outer mining operations." O studied the tactical display, calculating angles and timing with the precision of a predator stalking prey. His ship was outnumbered and outgunned, but it had advantages the aliens couldn't understand. Human creativity, human desperation, and most importantly, human willingness to sacrifice everything for revenge. "All crew prepare for attack run," O announced over the ship's communication system. "Remember why we're here. Remember what they did to our people. Leave no survivors." The attack came without warning. O's ship materialized from its stealth field directly behind the convoy, its weapons already firing. The first alien supply ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, its cargo of refined metals scattered across space like glittering confetti. But instead of retreating after the initial strike, O did something the aliens never expected. When his ship's ammunition ran low, he aimed the entire vessel at the largest enemy transport and activated the engines at full power. The stealth frigate became a guided missile, its human crew screaming their defiance as they drove their ship straight into the heart of the alien formation. The explosion could be seen from 3 different planets. This was the new reality the hegemony faced across human space. Attacks came from everywhere and nowhere, following no pattern their tactical computers could analyze. Human resistance fighters struck from asteroid fields where no life should be possible, from the surfaces of dead planets where the environment was too harsh for most species to survive, even from the vacuum of space itself, using makeshift weapons and suicidal tactics. The aliens had expected humans to behave like other conquered species, to submit, to work quietly, to accept their fate, as servants of a superior civilization. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that grew more dangerous with every passing day, that learned from every defeat, and that would rather die fighting than live in chains. The hegemony had wanted to harvest humanity like crops from a field. But they had forgotten that even the smallest seed, when planted in fertile ground and watered with blood, can grow into something that will strangle the very hand that tried to pluck it. In the crystal chambers of the Galactic Council's headquarters, floating in the void between star systems, Counselor Zithara's crystalline form flickered with patterns of deep concern. Her species, the Quillari, communicated through light and color, and right now her entire body pulsed with shades of crimson and violet, the colors of fear and confusion. The tactical hologram before her showed the destruction of the hegemony's 7th Battle Group, and Zithara couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. 3 massive alien warships, each capable of destroying entire planets, had been obliterated by what appeared to be ordinary human cargo vessels. But these weren't military attacks, they were acts of pure, calculated fury. "Replay the engagement." "From timestamp 1435, Zithara requested, her voice creating ripples of blue light across her surface. The hologram shifted, showing a human cargo freighter approaching the alien formation. The ship looked ancient and battered, barely held together by welding patches and hope. Any reasonable military commander would have dismissed it as space junk. But as the recording continued, Zithara watched in growing horror as the cargo ship's hull split open like a flower, revealing not trade goods, but dozens of nuclear warheads wired together in a configuration that defied all safety protocols. The human pilot, a woman named Captain Sumin Jang, according to the intercepted communications, had broadcast a single message before detonating her ship. "This is for the children of New Geneva." The explosion had vaporized not just the cargo ship, but 2 hegemony destroyers, and severely damaged a battle cruiser. The human captain had turned her own vessel into a weapon of mass destruction, sacrificing herself without hesitation to kill. Her enemies, "This is not warfare as we understand it," Zithara transmitted to her fellow council members, her crystalline form now pulsing with rapid bursts of orange, the color of urgent alarm. "This is extinction-level vengeance. These humans do not fight for territory or resources. They fight for the complete annihilation of those who wronged them." The Netherian representative, a gaseous being contained within an environmental suit, rippled in agreement. His species had evolved in the atmospheres of gas-giant planets, and they communicated through chemical signals that translated as sophisticated philosophical concepts. "In 10,000 years of galactic civilization," the Netherian said, his voice carried through synthesized speakers, "we have established protocols for honorable warfare. Species fight until one side surrenders, terms are negotiated, prisoners are exchanged with dignity. Even the most aggressive races understand the value of preserving life and maintaining some form of mercy." He gestured toward the tactical displays showing human attacks across 17 star systems. "But these humans, they offer no quarter. They accept no surrender. They do not take prisoners. They eliminate all witnesses. When our species wage war, we fight for victory. When humans wage war, they fight for extinction." The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Human forces had abandoned all conventional military strategy in favor of tactics that no civilized species would consider. They poisoned water supplies on hegemony worlds, making entire planets uninhabitable. They released biological agents, specifically designed to target alien physiology, weapons that killed slowly and horribly. They turned asteroid mining operations into kinetic bombardment systems, dropping chunks of rock on alien cities at relativistic speeds. Most disturbing of all, they used their own civilians as weapons. Cargo ships, passenger liners, even family. Vessels were being converted into suicide bombers. Human parents would strap explosives to their own ships and ram them into alien military formations, screaming the names of their dead children as they died. The council chamber fell silent as a new transmission arrived on all galactic frequencies. The image that appeared was Admiral Kyung-Min Lee, a middle-sized human female with graying hair and eyes that seemed to burn within a fire. She wore a simple military uniform, but the insignia on her shoulders indicated she spoke for all of humanity. "To the members of the Galactic Council," Admiral Lee began, her voice calm but carrying an undertone of barely controlled rage. "3 weeks ago, your hegemony allies murdered 12 human children in cold blood. They did this not in the heat of battle, but as a deliberate act of terrorism designed to break our spirit." She paused, and in that silence, every member of the council could feel the weight of human fury pressing down on them like a physical force. "You have 48 hours to begin returning our people," Lee continued. "Every human prisoner, every captured civilian, every person taken from their homes must be released immediately. If you comply, we will limit our retaliation to those directly responsible for these crimes." The Admiral's expression hardened, and her next words made several council members recoil in their seats. "If you do not comply, we will demonstrate what human extinction protocols look like. We will glass every hegemony world until the very rocks glow with radiation. We will burn every ship until space itself is filled with their ashes. We will hunt every member of their species across the galaxy until not one survives to remember their own name." The transmission ended, but the threat lingered in the council chamber like poison gas. Ambassador Vorthak, who had been so confident just weeks earlier, now stood before his fellow hegemony leaders, with his compound eyes dim and his posture defeated. The insect-like alien who had once boasted about humanity's primitive nature now spoke in whispers. "Perhaps we miscalculated their nature," he admitted, his forearms trembling slightly. "Our intelligence suggested they were weak, divided, focused on individual survival rather than species loyalty. We believed they would submit to superior force, as all reasonable beings do." He gestured toward the tactical reports covering his desk. Dozens of military disasters, supply lines cut, entire battle groups missing in action. Instead, we have awakened something that our tactical computers cannot analyze or predict. These humans do not fight for victory. They fight for vengeance. And they will not stop until either we are extinct or they are. The Galactic Council faced an impossible choice: abandon their hegemony allies to human wrath, or risk becoming targets themselves of a species that had just demonstrated they were willing to die and kill without limit or mercy. The hegemony. Homeworld had never seen anything like it. For millions of years, their capital planet had been the center of a vast galactic empire, protected by defensive systems that could stop entire battle fleets. But as the insect-like aliens looked up at their purple sky, they saw something that filled them with primal terror. 2,000 human ships hung in orbit like a storm cloud made of metal and death. The fleet was unlike anything in galactic military history, not just because of its size but because of what it represented. Half the vessels were proper warships, sleek destroyers and battle cruisers bristling with weapons. But the other half were converted civilian craft, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even family recreational vehicles, all hastily fitted with whatever guns and missiles humanity could manufacture. Admiral Seung-ho Park stood on the bridge of the flagship New Geneva's Revenge, watching the alien world spin slowly beneath his feet. He had been a career military officer for 30 years, trained in the careful protocols of civilized warfare. But civilization had died in the dust of a colony world, murdered along with 12 innocent children. Now he commanded not an army, but an instrument of species-level vengeance. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the hegemony capital," reported Communications Officer Chae-Yong Lee. "They're requesting to open negotiations." Admiral Park's laugh was cold and bitter. "Patch me through to all ships. Let every human in this fleet hear what these creatures have to say." The alien voice that came through the speakers was Vorthak himself, the same ambassador who had executed human children for the crime of crying for their parents. But now his mechanical translator couldn't hide the fear in his words. "Human fleet. This is Ambassador Vorthak of the Hegemony High Command. We acknowledge that regrettable incidents have occurred during our recent interactions. We are prepared to negotiate a mutually beneficial resolution to this conflict." The silence that followed was deafening. On 2,000 human ships, crews who had lost friends, family members, and children to alien raiders listened to their enemy try to bargain for mercy he had never shown. Admiral Park's response was broadcast not just to the human fleet, but across every communication frequency in the hegemony system, ensuring that every alien on every world could hear humanity's final judgment. There will be no negotiations. Counselor In Soo-yoon will now transmit our terms. You have 1 hour to comply or face the consequences. Counselor Yoon had been Earth's most skilled diplomat before the war, a man who had spent his career building bridges between nations and cultures. Now he served as humanity's voice of absolute judgment, his words carrying the weight of an entire species fury. "To the hegemony government and all allied species," Yoon began, his voice steady and implacable. "These are humanity's final terms. Unconditional surrender of all hegemony military forces, complete and immediate return of all human prisoners alive and unharmed, public execution of all commanders and officials responsible for war crimes against human civilians." He paused, letting the words sink in across the alien communication networks. "Any attempt at negotiation, any delay in compliance, any harm to a single human prisoner will result in the complete extinction of your species. You have 1 hour." The hegemony response came 47 minutes later. Vorthak's voice was desperate, now the mechanical precision replaced by something approaching panic. "The High Command is prepared to return most prisoners and make substantial reparations, but complete surrender is impossible. Perhaps we could arrange a prisoner exchange or territorial concessions." Admiral Park didn't even let him finish. "All ships commence bombardment. Show them what impossible looks like." What followed wasn't warfare, it was systematic extermination. The human fleet didn't target military installations or government buildings. Instead, they focused on the industrial centers that kept hegemony civilization running. Massive asteroid mining platforms, converted into kinetic weapons, dropped chunks of rock the size of city blocks onto manufacturing centers. The aliens had built their cities with the same cold efficiency they had shown in harvesting human colonies. But efficiency became a weakness when human engineers calculated exactly how much force was needed to collapse their infrastructure. Factories that had operated for centuries became crater fields in minutes. Power plants that had supplied energy to entire continents turned into radioactive ruins. Dr. Minji Kim, who had once welcomed the aliens as honored guests, now served as humanity's psychological warfare specialist. Her broadcasts reached every surviving hegemony world, carrying images of the destruction with a message that burned itself into alien memory. "You came to our colonies and took our people like cattle." Her voice echoed across their communication networks, accompanied by footage of human cities being vaporized by kinetic strikes. "You separated children from their parents and executed them to make a point about resistance." The images shifted to show hegemony cities burning, their insect-like inhabitants fleeing in terror as human weapons rained down from the sky. "You wanted to teach us about the consequences of defiance," Dr. Kim continued, her voice carrying the cold finality of absolute judgment. "Now learn what happens when you kill human children. Now learn what human vengeance looks like when we decide a species doesn't deserve to exist." On the surface of Hegemony Prime, civilians who had never seen combat huddled in underground shelters as the sky burned above them. They had been told their military was invincible, that their empire was eternal, that primitive species like humans existed only to serve their betters. Now they learned the truth. Humanity was not primitive. They were efficient. They were not weak. They were selective about when to show their strength. And they were not cattle to be harvested. They were predators who had spent millennia perfecting the art of making their enemies extinct. The bombardment continued for 18 hours. When it ended, the industrial capacity of the hegemony had been reduced by 70%. Billions of aliens were homeless, their cities nothing but glowing craters, their government in complete collapse. And still, the human fleet waited in orbit, 2,000 ships ready to finish what the aliens had started, when they decided to murder children as an example to their parents. The message was clear: surrender completely, or join those children in death. The final assault on Hegemony Prime began at dawn on the alien world, though the purple sky was already dark with smoke from the orbital bombardment. Colonel Sujin Lee stood in the landing craft with 300 human Marines, watching the capital city grow larger through the reinforced windows. The massive alien structures looked like twisted insect hives, all sharp angles and organic curves that hurt human eyes to look at directly. "Remember why we're here," Colonel Lee told her troops, her voice carrying over the roar of engines and weapons fire. "Every one of those creatures down there had a chance to stop this. They chose to murder children instead. Now they face the consequences." The Marines were volunteers from every nation on Earth and every human colony in space. Former soldiers, police officers, factory workers, teachers, people who had never wanted to be warriors until the aliens forced them to become something harder and more terrible than any military training could produce. Sergeant Yonsu Park checked his rifle one final time. He had been a high school football coach before the war, spending his days teaching teenagers about teamwork and sportsmanship. Now he was about to storm an alien fortress, and the only lesson that mattered was the one written in the blood of 12 murdered children. Some lines should never be crossed. The landing craft hit the ground hard, ramps dropping with metallic crashes as human Marines poured out into the alien city. The hegemony defenders were waiting for them, towering insect-like warriors with natural armor and energy weapons that could vaporize human flesh in seconds. By every tactical calculation, the aliens should have won easily, but calculations couldn't account for the fury that drove every human soldier forward. When Private Youngmin Kim saw an alien weapon aimed at his squad, he didn't take cover. He sprinted directly at the enemy, screaming the names of his 3 young nieces who had died on Europa colony. The aliens' shots missed because it couldn't understand why any creature would charge directly into certain death. The fighting was unlike anything in galactic military history. When human Marines ran out of ammunition, they used their bayonets. When the bayonets broke against alien armor, they used knives. When the knives were lost, they used rocks, chairs, pieces of broken machinery. Anything that could be turned into a weapon. Corporal Heejin Choi found herself trapped in a corridor with 4 alien soldiers, her rifle empty and her backup weapon jammed. Without hesitation, she pulled the pins from her remaining grenades and embraced the nearest enemy. Her final transmission was simple. Tell my family, I kept my promise. Tell them the monsters are dead. The aliens had expected human soldiers to fight like other species, with tactics and strategy, retreating when faced with overwhelming odds, surrendering when defeat became inevitable. Instead, they encountered warriors who seemed to regard their own deaths as acceptable losses, as long as they could take enemies with them. Deep in the command bunker beneath the capital city, Ambassador Vorthak watched the tactical displays with growing horror. His compound eyes, designed to process multiple streams of information simultaneously, couldn't make sense of what they were showing him. Human soldiers were winning battles they should have lost, surviving wounds that should have killed them, and fighting with an intensity that broke alien morale before the actual combat even began. "How many reinforcements do we have left?" Vorthak asked his aide, though his voice lacked its usual mechanical confidence. "Sir, our remaining troops are retreating. They report that the humans are not taking prisoners. Any hegemony soldier who attempts to surrender is simply executed on the spot." Vorthak's forearms trembled as the reality of his situation finally penetrated his arrogance. These weren't the primitive creatures he had dismissed weeks earlier. These were apex predators who had spent thousands of years learning to kill members of their own species with devastating efficiency. Now they had turned that expertise on an alien enemy, and the results were terrifying. The bunker doors exploded inward with a blast that shook the entire structure. Through the smoke and debris came Captain Dae-Sung Han, leading a squad of human marines whose armor was scorched and blooded, but whose eyes burned with unquenchable determination. "Ambassador Vorthak," Captain Han said quietly, pulling a ceremonial blade from his belt. The metal gleamed with an unusual shine. It had been forged from salvaged materials recovered from New Geneva colony, mixed with traces of alien technology and human determination. "You executed 12 human children to make a point about resistance," Han continued, activating a recording device that would broadcast this moment across human space and to every member of the Galactic Council. "This is our response to that." "Lesson." Vorthak tried to speak, perhaps to bargain or beg for mercy, but Han silenced him with a gesture. There would be no negotiations, no prisoner exchanges, no diplomatic solutions. This was justice, pure and simple, delivered by a species that had learned the hardest lesson in the galaxy: never threaten human children. The blade took exactly 3 seconds to complete its work. Vorthak's compound eyes went dark, and with them, the last real resistance of the hegemony empire collapsed. Across the star system, alien commanders who had been preparing for final battles simply laid down their weapons. The human reputation for showing no mercy had spread faster than their actual military advances. Rather than face boarding parties of human marines, entire hegemony fleets transmitted their surrenders over open channels. In 72 hours, humanity had reduced a galactic empire that had dominated 17 star systems for centuries into scattered groups of refugees begging for protection from any species willing to harbor them. The creatures who had once boasted about harvesting humans like crops now faced the terrible truth. They had awakened something far older and more dangerous than any galactic civilization. They had awakened human wrath, and it would not be satisfied until every debt was paid in full. The Galactic Council chamber had never hosted a species like humanity before. President Jeong Kim walked through the crystalline corridors with quiet confidence. Her simple black suit, a stark contrast to the elaborate environmental suits and exotic forms of the alien representatives. Behind her walked Admiral Seung-ho, Park and General Ki-won Lim, their military uniforms bearing the scars of recent battles and their eyes carrying the weight of hard-won victory. The chamber itself was a marvel of galactic engineering, a massive sphere suspended in space, with each species occupying their own environmental zone. The gas-breathing Netherians floated in their misty atmosphere, while the crystalline Quillari reflected rainbow patterns across the walls. Other species that humanity was only now learning about watched nervously from their own specialized habitats. But all eyes were on the humans as they took their place at the center of the chamber. 3 months ago, this species hadn't even known that galactic civilization existed. Now they commanded more fear and respect than empires that had ruled for millennia. Councillor Zithara of the Quillari was the first to speak, her crystalline form flickering with nervous patterns of blue and green light. President Kim, on behalf of the Galactic Council, we welcome humanity as a full member of our alliance. We have prepared generous terms for your integration into galactic society. The holographic display showed star maps, highlighting vast regions of space, entire solar systems rich with resources, advanced technology beyond anything humanity had dreamed of, and privileged trading rights that would make Earth one of the wealthiest worlds in the galaxy. It was an offer that should have been irresistible to any newly discovered species. President Kim studied the display for several long seconds before responding. "We appreciate your generous offer," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "And we accept your terms." A collective sigh of relief seemed to flow through the assembled aliens. The humans had proven themselves capable of unimaginable destruction, but perhaps they could be satisfied with wealth and territory, like any other species. "However," Kim continued, and the temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees, "we have one additional condition that is non-negotiable." She gestured, and Admiral Park activated a holographic display of his own. Images filled the chamber. Footage from New Geneva colony, pictures of the 12 murdered children, scenes of human prisoners being loaded into alien cargo holds like livestock. Any species that harms human civilians, anywhere in the galaxy, will face the same. "Fate is the hegemony," Kim said, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. "Any species that stands by and watches while humans are murdered, enslaved or mistreated, will be considered accomplices to those crimes." The Netherian representative's gaseous form swirled with agitation. "But President Kim, such terms would essentially make humanity the galactic police force. No species in our history has claimed such authority over others." Kim's expression remained unchanged. "No species in galactic history has murdered human children to make a point about resistance. The hegemony learned what happens when you cross that line. We trust that lesson will not need to be repeated." The vote was unanimous. Every species in the Council agreed to humanity's terms, though whether from genuine respect or simple terror was unclear. Within hours, the formal documents were signed, and humanity officially joined the galactic community as its newest and most feared member. Meanwhile, across human space, the rescued prisoners were returning home to celebrations that mixed joy with profound grief. Transport ships arrived daily at Earth, Mars, and the surviving colonies, carrying people who had been given up for dead. Families reunited with tears and laughter, but the scars of their experiences would never fully heal. Captain. Sun Wu Li had spent 2 months in alien labor camps before human marines freed him from a mining operation near the galactic rim. Now he stood with his wife and daughter at the memorial ceremony on New Geneva colony, looking at the simple black stone that bore 12 names in gold letters. The inscription was brief but devastating in its simplicity. "They killed our children. We ended their civilization." Flowers covered the memorial, not just from human families, but from alien species throughout the galaxy who had sent offerings as symbols of respect and fear. The message was clear. Humanity would tolerate many things, but threats to their children would result in swift and absolute retribution. Dr. Minji Kim, who had first welcomed the aliens to Earth, now served as humanity's Director of Galactic Relations. Her job was to ensure that the galaxy's other species understood exactly what humanity expected from their new membership in galactic civilization. "We are not conquerors," she explained to a gathering of alien ambassadors. "We have no interest in ruling other species or expanding our territory through force, but we are protectors, and our protection extends to every human being in the galaxy." She paused, letting her words sink in. The hegemony thought they could treat humans as expendable resources. They discovered that human lives are not expendable, they are priceless, and the price of taking them is extinction. The galaxy had indeed become a much quieter place. Species that had engaged in slavery, piracy, or casual violence against weaker civilizations suddenly found themselves reconsidering their policies. The humans had demonstrated that apparent primitiveness could hide capabilities that defied galactic understanding. Trade routes that had been plagued by raiders for centuries became peaceful overnight. Diplomatic disputes that might have escalated to warfare were resolved through negotiation instead. The mere possibility that humanity might intervene in galactic conflicts had become a powerful force for peace. But in the quiet corners of human space, in the rebuilt colonies and growing settlements, children played under alien stars and dreamed of exploring the galaxy. They were protected now by the reputation their species had earned through blood and fury, a reputation that said simply and clearly that some lines should never be crossed. The galaxy had learned to fear humanity, but more importantly, it had learned to respect the fierce love that drove human vengeance. In trying to harvest humanity like crops, the hegemony had awakened something far more dangerous than any weapon or technology. They had awakened a species that would move stars to protect their children and burn worlds to avenge them.